Let's get one thing straight. Not every heartbeat you feel is love. Not every ache in your chest means you're devoted. Sometimes what you're calling love is nothing more than attachment wrapped in anxiety. And the most dangerous lie you can tell yourself is the one where you confuse possession with passion, comfort with commitment, and need with nurturing. You say you can't live without her. But is that because you truly love her? Or because you're afraid of living without her? Because love, real, healthy, grounded love, doesn't make you feel like you're suffocating when she takes a step away. It doesn't demand control. It doesn't stalk her every move. It doesn't collapse the moment she wants space. Attachment does that. Insecurity does that. Fear does that. Love allows. Attachment clings. Love trusts. Attachment doubts. Love grows. Attachment traps. Let's talk about your why. Why are you staying? Is it because she inspires your soul, fuels your growth, and aligns with your values? Or is it because she fills a void that you haven't had the courage to face? Some people don't fall in love with a person. They fall in love with the way that person temporarily numbs their pain. They call it love, but it's dependency. It's a Band-Aid on a wound that needs healing, not hiding. If your version of love makes you jealous, obsessive, manipulative, if her absence feels like withdrawal instead of longing, then it's not love you're feeling, it's addiction. And that kind of attachment will rot everything beautiful between you. You need to be honest with yourself. Do you protect her heart, or do you guard your own ego through her presence? Do you see her essence, her spirit, her freedom, or do you just see your own fears reflected in her leaving? Love says, go, if you must, I'll honor your journey. Attachment says, stay or I'll fall apart. Love gives wings. Attachment builds cages. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to let go of the need to possess her, to release her from the burden of being your emotional oxygen, to stop making her your therapy. You want to know if it's love or attachment? Here's the test. If she needed to leave today for her own dreams, her growth, her healing, would you cheer her on from the sidelines even with tears in your eyes? Or would you guilt her into staying just to soothe your emptiness? Because love doesn't demand, love respects. Love empowers. Love does not fear her evolution. And if your love cannot survive without her constant proximity, without her texts, without her availability, then maybe it's not love. Maybe it's your unhealed wounds begging for someone else to fix them. Let that sink in. Real love is not about who stays the longest. It's about who grows the deepest. It's not about holding on. It's about choosing each other freely, without fear. So before you call it love, ask yourself, do I honor her presence?
Or do I fear her absence?
Because the answer to that one question will tell you everything you need to know. Now go do the hardest, bravest thing. Face yourself. Heal yourself. And when you love again, love clean. Love from wholeness, not hunger. From power, not panic. Because she deserves that. And so do you. You say you can't get her out of your head, that her body, her scent, the way she touches you, it's all-consuming. You ache for her presence, crave her voice, burn for her skin like it's oxygen, and you're drowning without it. But pause. Is that really love? Or are you just intoxicated by the way she makes you feel? There's a fine line between desire and devotion, and most people never learn the difference, because when you're used to emotional starvation, even a sip of closeness can feel like a feast. So you call it love, because your heart races, your thoughts spiral, and your body reacts every time she's near. But obsession and connection are not the same. The first is about control. The second is about presence. When you close your eyes and think about her, what do you see? Her curves, her lips, the way she moved against you the last time you touched? Or do you see the way her eyes soften when she talks about her childhood pain? The way her voice cracks when she tries to stay strong? Do you desire her essence, or are you just addicted to the experience of her? Because craving her body isn't proof that you love her soul. Wanting her in your bed doesn't mean you respect what's going on in her mind. And missing her touch doesn't mean you understand her heart. Sometimes we chase people not because we value them, but because they distract us from the war within ourselves. You say she completes you, that you feel alive when she's around, but real love doesn't need someone to feel alive. It chooses someone because you already are. Real love starts from fullness, not emptiness, from desire to give, not desperation to receive. It's easy to be drawn to someone who makes your heart beat faster and your nights feel less lonely. But intimacy is not about how loud your heartbeat gets. It's about how silently you can sit with her wounds, how patiently you can hold space when she's messy, moody, or silent. Love is not the rush. Love is the stillness. Love is not what you do when you're turned on. It's who you become when she's not performing for your approval. You're not wrong for wanting her, but you need to ask yourself, are you loving her or are you using her to soothe your ache for connection? Because lust can blind you, passion can fool you, and sometimes what we chase in someone else is just a mirror of the parts we haven't faced in ourselves. If your need for her disappears the moment she stops giving you affection, if you pull away when she's not soft, sensual, or romantic, then it was never love to begin with. You were just chasing comfort in the shape of a woman. Love listens, love leans in, love stays when she's not glowing, when she's heavy, confused, or just needs space to breathe. You say you're in love, but maybe you're just in fear of being alone, of being unseen, of sitting in silence with nothing but your own thoughts. Maybe you're clinging to her because you've never known how to hold yourself, and she became the drug that dulled that ache. You say you desire her, but does your desire hold her, or does it grip her too tightly? There's a difference between wanting someone and needing to own them, a difference between loving her and trying to cage her, and most don't realize when they've crossed that invisible line. When passion turns possessive, when intimacy becomes a form of silent control, it begins subtly. You want to know where she is, who she's talking to, why she's been quiet. You tell yourself it's because you care, because you're invested. But deep down, you're not protecting her. You're protecting your fear of losing her. And that fear, masked as affection, will slowly suffocate what was once sacred. Desire that's rooted in insecurity doesn't build connection, it builds obsession. When every glance she gives to the world feels like a betrayal, when her independence feels like a threat, when her success makes you feel smaller instead of proud, that's not desire, that's emotional imprisonment. And no matter how much you crave her body, if you can't celebrate her freedom, you don't truly love her. You just want to keep her. Real intimacy doesn't demand her closeness. It doesn't panic when she pulls away to catch her breath. If your heart races the second she's silent, if your mind spirals the moment she says, I need space, then you're not in love. You're in fear, and fear creates illusions. It turns you into a version of yourself that needs to be reassured, revalidated, constantly told, I'm still here, I still choose you. But what if she doesn't always say that? What if she needs time for herself? What if she's growing in directions you don't fully understand yet? Can you still desire her then, not for what she gives you, but for who she is becoming? If your intimacy is only secure when she's beside you, texting you, choosing you every minute, then you're not loving her, you're controlling her access to peace. Love that's real, love that's rooted, allows her to breathe, to roam, to rise. Because the deepest form of connection isn't built in constant closeness. It's built in freedom, in trust, in the sacred space where she knows she's not being watched, but still chooses to return. And if your desire turns cold the moment she sets boundaries, then your attraction was conditional. You didn't love her, you loved how she made you feel. And now that she's standing in her power, you're uncomfortable because she's no longer shrinking to fit into your comfort zone. Hook after hook, we confuse emotional chaos with passion. We mistake jealousy for care. We believe that if we're not constantly attached, the bond is breaking. But intimacy that's genuine doesn't shatter under distance. It doesn't demand, where are you? It whispers, I trust you. It doesn't ask her to prove her love every day. It knows, it breathes, it allows. And in that sacred allowance, desire becomes something deeper. It's no longer a hunger to consume her. It's a longing to witness her, to honor her autonomy, to admire her strength, to make love, not just to her body, but to the fact that she chooses you, when she could walk away at any moment. Wanting her is beautiful, but needing her to stay small, quiet, predictable, that's not love, that's fear, dressed up in lust, and eventually that kind of need will drive her away, not bring her closer, because no woman can bloom in a garden where every petal is policed. Do you think being obsessed with her means you're deeply in love? You think texting her all day, tracking her moods, needing her constant attention is romantic? You've convinced yourself that your constant need for reassurance is passion, but obsession is not intimacy. It's fear disguised as desire. It's emotional instability dressed up as devotion. And no matter how tightly you cling, obsession will never lead to real connection. It will only suffocate the very love you're trying to protect. Intimacy begins where obsession ends. It's not in the constant checking, not in the demanding replies, not in the anxious spirals when she doesn't respond the way you expect. If your heart only feels safe when she's right next to you, if your mind spins into chaos when she's silent, that's not love, that's a fear of abandonment. And fear makes lovers possessive, not passionate. You tell yourself, I just care too much. But is it care or is it control? Because control doesn't always come with raised voices and locked doors. Sometimes it comes with subtle manipulations. Why didn't you call me back? Who are you with? You used to send me cute texts. What changed? Sometimes it sounds like concern, but what it really is pressure. Quiet, constant pressure. And that pressure doesn't create closeness, it creates resistance. Because no matter how soft your voice is, if your energy makes her feel monitored instead of free, she will start to hide pieces of herself, and that is the slow death of intimacy. The paradox is this. The more you obsess, the less she feels safe. The tighter you hold, the more she wants to run. The more you demand presence, the more her soul starts to crave distance. Real intimacy is not about taking up all her emotional space. It's about making room. It's not about being needed every moment. It's about being trusted, even in the quiet ones. It's not about chasing constant closeness. It's about letting her choose you without the weight of your anxiety on her shoulders. A woman cannot fully open herself to a partner who makes her feel like she has to shrink in order to keep the peace. She can't be soft when she's walking on eggshells. She can't be sensual when she's being watched for every emotional shift. And no matter how good the sex is, if she feels emotionally cornered, she will disconnect even with your hands on her skin. You want her to surrender? Then stop trying to own her. You want her to open? Then stop trying to control the pace. You want to be the one she comes back to? Then stop being the one who crowds her inner world. Because the feminine opens in safety, she reveals herself in stillness. She craves closeness, but not at the expense of her autonomy. And when your obsession pollutes the air between you, she begins to guard herself. She starts to feel like her body is a place where your fears go to hide. And that is not intimacy, that is emotional survival. So ask yourself, do you want her to trust you or just to be near you? Do you want to be chosen or just not left? Do you desire her or do you need her to manage your emptiness? Because the difference will shape everything. One path leads to depth, to love, to soul-level connection. The other leads to distance, resentment, and eventual silence. And if you keep calling obsession love, one day she'll walk away, not because she doesn't care, but because she had to protect herself from the version of you that never learned the difference. You say you're drawn to her, that there's something about her you can't resist, her laugh, her curves, her scent, when she leans in close. But let's strip away the surface for a moment. Because real intimacy doesn't start when the lights go off and clothes come off. It starts when you learn how to touch her without using your hands. When you know how to reach her without crossing the room. When your presence, not your pressure, becomes the thing that makes her melt. You think foreplay begins with a kiss. It doesn't. It begins in the way you listen when she speaks, when she's not trying to impress you. It begins in the way you look into her eyes without turning it into a demand. The way you make her feel seen without scanning her body, like it's something to conquer. Because if you only show up when she's arched and moaning, but disappear when she's anxious and unraveling, that's not love, that's conditional desire. That's attraction with a leash. Hook after hook, women are told that their worth is in their ability to be wanted, to be sexy, to be soft, submissive, available. But real connection doesn't come from rehearsed moans or perfect lighting. It comes from a place that's much deeper, where she feels like she can be all of herself with you, not just the version that turns you on.
Do you want to touch her deeply?
Learn to touch her mind. Learn to hold her stories, the unpolished ones. Sit with the parts of her that don't smile on command. Be present with the silence that hangs between words when she's processing something bigger than both of you. Because here's what no one tells you, a woman doesn't truly open until she feels emotionally safe. Her sensuality is directly tied to how deeply she's understood. If your attention disappears the moment the conversation turns vulnerable, she will notice. She may still kiss you, still say yes, but inside something will pull back, something will go quiet, something sacred will stay locked. And the sad part is, many never even notice it. They think they're connecting because the sex is intense, but intensity is not intimacy, and chemistry without consciousness is just fireworks without foundation. So how do you truly seduce a woman's soul? You remember the little things she says in passing, the way her voice changes when she talks about her dreams. You respect her boundaries like you respect her curves. You give her space without punishing her for needing it. You don't just show up for the highs, you stay present through the quiet, through the mundane, through the I'm not in the mood tonight. You want her to open wide in bed, make her feel emotionally held when she's messy, uncertain, or tired of the world. Make her feel like your desire isn't dependent on her performance, that she doesn't have to be your fantasy. She can just be herself. Because when a woman feels emotionally held, her sensuality blossoms. She becomes more radiant, more free, more wild in the most breathtaking ways. But if she senses that your attention is only available when she's on, she will begin to armor up. And no matter how hard you try to seduce her body, you'll never get past the walls she's had to build to protect her spirit. So the question isn't how badly do you want her? It's, can she actually relax around you? Can she breathe around you? Can she take off more than her clothes? Can she take off her mask, her fears, her emotional armor, and know you'll still be there, soft-eyed and steady? Because that is the beginning of something real, something holy, something that touches more than skin. You think love is proved by how tightly you hold on, how present you stay, how close you remain, day after day. But what if love, real love, is measured not by how much you stay, but by how gracefully you let her go when she needs to grow? She's not just a lover, she's a universe in motion, and sometimes she'll need to step back, not to leave you, but to find herself. And in those moments, the way you respond reveals everything about the kind of intimacy you offer. If your connection crumbles, the second she says, "I need space," it wasn't intimacy, it was dependency wrapped in desire. Because love that is rooted in truth doesn't fall apart when distance appears. It doesn't beg, plead, or manipulate. It breathes, it allows, it waits with calm strength instead of collapsing into chaos. And that strength, that emotional stability, is what makes a woman feel truly safe, not just physically but spiritually. If your closeness requires her constant availability, if your love feels threatened when she chooses solitude, if your desire fades the moment she stops catering to you, then you were never intimate with her. You were only intimate with the version of her that made you feel needed. Hook after hook, many relationships get tangled in fear. We confuse presence with possession. We believe we must be everywhere in her life to prove we care. But true intimacy isn't a tight grip, it's an open hand. It's saying, "I trust your path, even when I'm not part of every step." She is allowed to evolve, to get quiet, to fall in love with her own becoming. And in those seasons when she turns inward, when her attention shifts from romance to rebirth, will you honor her transformation, or will you punish her for not revolving around you? Because here's the truth, if your desire for her fades, the moment she prioritizes her growth, then your love was never about her. It was about how you felt in her presence. And that's not love. That's self-soothing disguised as devotion. Real intimacy invites evolution. It celebrates her rising. It doesn't fear the fire she walks through. It warms itself at the edge of her flame and waits patiently for her return. You want her to trust you with her body? Then be the kind of presence that doesn't crumble when she needs to retreat. And remember who she is, without anyone else's reflection. She isn't here to be your constant comfort. She isn't here to pour endlessly into your wounds while her own go ignored. The feminine rises in cycles, sometimes wild, sometimes still, sometimes unavailable to anything except her own healing. And if you can't hold space for her when she's in that storm, then you haven't earned her softness when the sun returns. You think being close means always being together, but closeness in its truest form means this: she can drift, she can explore, she can momentarily choose herself, and still feel your love as steady as a heartbeat in the background. Not loud, not demanding, just there, present, patient, powerful. And if you can love her in her becoming, not just in her giving, she will remember that. She will feel that. She will open in ways that no touch can summon, because the kind of safety that says, "Go be who you need to be, I'll still be here," is the kind that penetrates deeper than sex, deeper than words. It reaches into the soul and says, "This is love without fear." So ask yourself, do you want her growth or just her attention? Do you crave her truth or only her affection? Because your answers will define the difference between intimacy and attachment, between holding her and holding her back. Anyone can undress her body. That part is easy. Seduction is everywhere. Attention is cheap. But to stand in front of her and hold her when she's emotionally naked, trembling, unfiltered, undone, that's where real intimacy begins. That's where most people back away. Not because she's too much, but because they were never prepared to witness all of her. You want her to open, then don't just crave her curves. Crave her chaos. Crave the part of her that's not curated for you. The part she hides when the world demands her to be soft, beautiful, and composed. Crave the moment her voice shakes when she tells you the truth. The moment her eyes fill with a storm and she doesn't know how to ask for what she needs. Because in those raw, unguarded moments, she isn't performing, she's revealing.
And here's the hook, Mus.
If your love only shows up when she's dressed in desire, but disappears when she's drenched in emotion, you're not loving her. You're loving the image of her. You're loving a version that makes you feel strong, desirable, needed. But real intimacy doesn't thrive on highlights. It breathes in the shadows. She needs to know that when her walls fall, you won't fall with them. That when she's not sweet or sexy, when she's grieving, angry, confused, you'll still be there, steady, holding space, listening without fixing, touching her heart before you reach for her body. So many think foreplay begins with a kiss, but for her, it begins with safety. It begins with knowing she won't be shamed for her sensitivity, that her vulnerability won't be weaponized, that the parts of her she doesn't show the world can live in your arms without judgment. You say you want to know her deeply, but how do you respond when she cries in front of you, when she's quiet for days, lost in her head? Do you try to pull her out of it for your comfort, or do you meet her in that silence, letting her feel without rushing her? There's a sacred kind of intimacy that happens when a woman knows she doesn't have to shrink to keep your love. When she knows she can unravel without being abandoned. When she realizes her softness isn't a risk, it's a bridge to something deeper than chemistry. Hook after hook, she's learned that opening up can be dangerous. That being too emotional will push people away. That vulnerability makes her weaker. But if you show her that her emotional nakedness is not a burden, it's a gift. She will give you access to parts of her that no one else has ever seen. And that's when the real connection begins. Not just the physical surrender, but the soul's. That moment when she looks at you and knows, you've seen me shattered and you stayed. You've seen me silent and you listened. You've seen me angry, messy, afraid, and you didn't shrink. Anyone can trace the outline of her body, but few have the strength to hold her inner storms. Few have the patience to stand still while she finds her footing. Again, few understand that the most intimate thing she can do is not take off her clothes, it's take off her armor. So when you say you love her, when you say you want her, ask yourself, do you want the full version, the one with jagged edges and soft scars, or just the woman who makes you feel whole? Because if you can't meet her in her vulnerability, you'll never truly touch her, no matter how close your bodies get.